When a security incident happens, it is natural for people to want answers right away, and that impulse creates one of the most dangerous moments in incident work, the moment you start talking before you are ready. A beginner might assume the hardest part is finding the attacker or fixing the broken system. But a lot of real damage comes from sloppy communication that exposes sensitive details, causes panic, or creates legal problems. The goal of secure stakeholder communication is to share what people need to know at the right time, in the right way, without accidentally handing helpful clues to an attacker or revealing private data. Stakeholders can include executives, technical teams, customer-facing staff, legal and privacy partners, and sometimes customers or vendors. But the exact audience matters less than the principle that not everyone needs the same level of detail. In this lesson, you are learning to treat communication as part of security control itself, not as a side task, because how information moves can either reduce risk or multiply it. A useful starting point is to separate two ideas that beginners often mix together: transparency and disclosure. Transparency means you are honest about the situation, you provide updates, and you do not hide the existence of a problem that people must respond to. Disclosure means you reveal specific details, such as what system is affected, what vulnerability might be involved, what data might be exposed, or what defenses failed, and those details can be dangerous if shared too widely or too early. Secure communications try to maximize transparency while minimizing unnecessary disclosure. That sounds like a contradiction at first, but it becomes clearer when you think about the purpose of each message. The purpose is not to satisfy curiosity, prove expertise, or calm every fear with technical specifics, because those motives often push people to overshare. The purpose is to align action, protect people, and preserve options, which usually requires simple, bounded statements that can be defended later when more facts are known. To communicate safely, you need to understand what information is sensitive in an incident context, because it is not only personal data that creates risk. A name, an address, or a customer record is obviously sensitive, but so is anything that reveals the current shape of your defenses, the weak points of your environment, or the status of your response. If you say that a specific server is down, you might be telling an attacker what part of the environment to target next, especially if they are still present. If you say you are rotating credentials, you might tip them off to accelerate actions before you lock them out. If you casually mention that logs were missing, you might be revealing that detection coverage is weak in a certain area. Even timing can be sensitive, because a message that says you are still investigating might signal that the attacker has more time. Secure stakeholder communication treats every technical detail as potentially useful to someone who should not have it. Now connect that sensitivity idea to the reality that most incidents are confusing early on, which creates the second major danger: communicating guesses as if they are facts. In the first hour of an incident, you often have partial signals, like unusual activity, an alert, a report from a user, or a service disruption. People will ask whether data was stolen, whether an attacker is inside, whether customers are affected, and whether a specific cause is known. If you answer those questions too specifically, you may be forced into later corrections that damage trust, and you may also create new risk by spreading incorrect details. A safe communication style uses confidence levels without sounding evasive. You can share what you know, what you are doing, and what is being prioritized, while clearly separating confirmed information from unconfirmed possibilities. The discipline here is not about being vague. It is about being accurate under uncertainty. Stakeholders also do not all need the same kind of truth at the same time, and learning that distinction is a key beginner skill. A technical responder might need system names, timestamps, and exact indicators to act quickly, but a business leader might need impact, timeline, and decision points without raw technical detail. A customer-facing team might need approved language about what to tell a worried customer without revealing internal investigation steps. Legal and privacy partners may need specific facts, but they may also need to control how those facts are documented and shared to reduce liability and protect sensitive material. When you treat all stakeholders as one audience and blast out the same message to everyone, you usually end up either oversharing with people who do not need details or undersharing with people who do. Secure communication is not just about what you say. It is also about choosing the correct channel and audience boundaries. Channels matter because the tools you use to communicate can become part of the incident itself. If email is compromised, sending sensitive updates through email can feed the attacker. If a chat platform is not controlled, your conversation might be accessible to the wrong people or retained in ways that create future risk. Secure stakeholder communications rely on the idea of trusted channels, which are methods of communication you have reason to believe are not being monitored or altered by an attacker. This might mean using a pre-established out-of-band method, like a phone call or a separate messaging system, when there is any suspicion that normal channels are unsafe. Even when channels are not compromised, they can still leak data through forwarding, screenshots, or accidental inclusion of large groups. A simple discipline is to assume that anything written can be copied, and anything copied can escape its original audience, which should shape how much detail you put into written updates. You can make this practical by adopting a simple rule. The wider the audience, the less detail you include, and the more you rely on stable, non-technical language. A broad update might say that a security issue is under investigation, certain services are impacted, and the organization is taking steps to contain and restore operations. That message gives enough for leaders and staff to align without exposing a map of your internal environment. Then a narrower update to a technical team can include deeper details, but still with care, because even internal details can leak if the wrong account is compromised. This is where the idea of need to know becomes more than a slogan. It becomes an operating principle where the information shared is directly connected to a job someone must do, rather than an attempt to make everyone feel informed through raw detail. Another core concept is creating message discipline through clear ownership, because secure communication breaks down quickly when too many people speak independently. During an incident, people want to be helpful, and they might send their own updates, offer theories, or reassure others without approval. That creates a messy story, and it also increases the chance that sensitive information escapes. Secure communication works best when there is a defined communications owner or small communications group that gathers inputs, validates what can be shared, and then publishes consistent updates. This does not mean technical responders are silenced. It means their insights flow through a controlled process. The communications owner is also responsible for keeping track of what was said, when, and to whom, because that record becomes essential later when you need to reconcile timelines and decisions. To avoid leaking sensitive incident data, it helps to understand common leak patterns that are not obvious at first. One pattern is unnecessary specificity, like naming the affected system, the suspected vulnerability, or the detection method in a broad audience update. Another pattern is sharing raw artifacts, such as screenshots of logs, copies of suspicious emails, or file samples, because those can contain hidden sensitive data like usernames, internal host names, or customer details. A third pattern is including full email threads or forwarding messages that contain earlier speculation. A fourth pattern is using casual language that implies certainty, such as saying the attacker stole data when you only suspect access. A fifth pattern is including information about security controls, such as saying exactly which monitoring tool found the issue or which part of the network was not monitored. Each of these patterns can be corrected by pausing and asking what action the audience needs, then removing everything else. You also need a safe way to talk about data impact without exposing data itself, and that requires careful vocabulary. Instead of naming specific records or showing examples, you can talk in categories, like customer contact information, payment information, authentication data, or internal operational data. Even then, you should be cautious about precision until you have evidence. It is often better to describe the scope of what is being assessed rather than what is confirmed, such as saying that the team is evaluating whether certain types of data were accessed. This wording matters because it avoids making claims that you cannot back up while still acknowledging the concern. It also creates room for updates as your understanding improves. The discipline here is to respect the difference between potential exposure, confirmed access, confirmed exfiltration, and confirmed misuse, because each of those statements carries different risk and different meaning. Secure stakeholder communication also depends on balancing speed with correctness, and beginners often think they must choose one or the other. The reality is that you can communicate quickly if you communicate in a structured way that limits what you promise. For example, you can commit to a regular update rhythm, even if the content is small, because predictability reduces panic and reduces ad hoc requests for information. You can also communicate what actions are underway, like containment, investigation, restoration, and coordination, without describing exactly how those actions are being executed. Another useful practice is to define what decisions are pending, such as whether to take a service offline or notify affected parties, because that focuses leaders on choices rather than on technical curiosities. When you share decisions and impacts rather than technical mechanics, you often move faster while leaking less. A critical part of not leaking sensitive incident data is protecting the integrity of your own documentation and internal communications, because those are often discoverable later and can be misunderstood out of context. People write differently under stress, and they might include blunt opinions, unverified theories, or language that makes the organization sound careless. That language can harm the organization later, even if it never leaves the internal team, because it shapes decisions and can become evidence of poor judgment. Secure communication aims to keep written statements factual, measured, and tied to evidence. It also encourages using secure storage and restricted access for incident notes, so the material does not spread across personal notes, shared drives, and uncontrolled chat rooms. For a beginner, the key idea is that controlling information flow is part of controlling incident risk. To make this feel real, imagine a simple scenario where an employee reports a suspicious login prompt, and then certain accounts begin resetting passwords unexpectedly. Leaders want to know if it is phishing, if accounts are compromised, and if the organization is under attack. A risky message would say that a specific identity system is compromised, that a certain defensive layer failed, and that attackers are using a known technique, because you may not know any of that yet. A safer message would say that there is an account security issue under investigation, that precautions are being taken to protect access, and that staff may see additional authentication steps or password reset prompts. The difference is that the safer message helps people behave safely without revealing internal systems or giving the attacker visibility into what you have detected. It also avoids naming a cause until the evidence supports it, which preserves trust when later updates refine the story. As you build skill, you should start thinking about communication as a controlled pipeline with inputs, validation, and outputs, rather than a spontaneous conversation. Inputs come from responders, monitoring signals, and operational teams who see service impact. Validation means checking facts, confirming what can be shared, and aligning with any legal, privacy, or leadership constraints. Outputs are the messages tailored to each stakeholder group, delivered through channels that match the sensitivity of the content. When this pipeline works, it reduces chaos because people know where to send information, where to get updates, and what language is approved. It also reduces leakage because sensitive details are filtered out before broad distribution. For brand new learners, the takeaway is that secure communication is not only about choosing careful words, but also about building a process that prevents accidental oversharing when everyone is stressed. The final concept to lock in is that secure stakeholder communication is not about hiding, spinning, or minimizing, because that approach often backfires and creates lasting damage. It is about protecting people and protecting the response by giving the right information to the right people in the right form. If you do it well, stakeholders feel informed because they understand impact, actions, and next steps, even if they do not receive raw technical details. If you do it poorly, you can create additional harm by exposing sensitive data, giving the attacker helpful clues, confusing internal teams, or making statements that must later be corrected. Communication is a security control that operates on words, channels, timing, and audience boundaries, and it deserves the same care you would give to access control or monitoring. When you treat it that way, you build trust during the incident, and you protect the organization from the secondary damage that often outlasts the technical problem.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.